All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining me today. My name is Holly Waters. I'm an accredited practicing dietitian and a senior clinician here at Empower. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you about how we can optimize your eating to help keep you strong and healthy. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I'm presenting today from the lands of the Whadjuk people, who are the people of the Noongar Nation. I'd like to pay respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are part of this community today. I recognise their deep connection to the land, the waterways and their continuing cultural practices and acknowledge that sovereignty will never be ceded. Today, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to look at how to maintain and optimise our health and well-being. This information is very general. So if you're needing a bit more specific information, it's a really great idea to connect with a dietitian as we can provide some more specific advice to help you tailor the information to support your specific health needs. Now, you've probably heard how nutrition is important because it can prevent chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease, but it's also really important for preventing things like infections and just generally having a good quality of life. Being healthy and active can help you stay independent. It can improve your balance and prevent falls. It can strengthen your bones and your muscles, again, with that balance and prevention of falls piece there. It can manage or lower your risk of those chronic diseases I mentioned, so heart disease, diabetes. It's also really central to maintaining your energy levels and your concentration. And it can improve your mood and sense of well-being. Another part is that food can just help you stay connected and meet new people. We often socialize around food, so it's a really good tool for that purpose as well. As we get older, we may not need to eat as much as we have done in the past. We might not be as active as when we were younger. However, with this in mind, we need to be mindful that although our appetite might not be as high, we still need a similar amount of nutrients. In fact, sometimes we need even more. So this means we need to choose foods with lots of vitamins and minerals in them, but not necessarily a lot of calories. So let's go through some specifics of what we can do to optimize our health as we get older. It's really important to include enough protein in your diet. And I imagine this is something that everybody has heard something about. Protein is very much a buzz nutrient. It's important in keeping our muscles strong. The foods with protein have lots of vitamins and minerals as well, which makes them really great choices. This can help keep our immune system strong, ensure our skin heals if you have any cuts or wounds. So there's a number of key parts that come with protein. Spreading out your protein intake across the day in your meals and your snacks as well, and combining meals with any activity that you're doing. So if you're going to the gym or you're doing a particular exercise, having some type of recovery meal or snack that's high in protein can be another great way just to help your body better utilize that nutrition that's coming in to strengthen those muscles. Another key nutrient is calcium. And this one, I imagine we all know about as being really central to maintaining strong bones. So building and repairing those bone cells. As we age, we do lose some bone mineral density. And as a result, calcium is lost from the bones and becomes difficult to replace. This is why it's so important to ensure that the food choices you're making are also great sources of dietary calcium. On the slide, you'll see the recommendations by age for males and females as to how many serves of calcium-rich foods to include per day. So for those between 51 and 70, it's 2.5 serves per day for men and 4 serves per day for women. And that increases slightly for men over the age of 70 up to 3.5 serves per day. It stays at that 4 serves per day for women as bone turnover tends to increase with changes in hormone levels as we age. On the slide, you'll also see a number of dietary sources of calcium, so things that you can include that will help you boost your calcium intake. The obvious ones are your dairy foods, so that could be a cup of cow's milk, which is 1 serve, or a fortified plant milk alternative. It could be a tub of yogurt, a couple of slices of cheese, some of your ricotta or cream cheese, as well as things like dark green leafy vegetables, soy foods such as tofu, tempeh, soybeans like edamame and soy milk, and oranges are another great source of calcium and can be additionally a great source of fiber, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The next nutrient that's important to keep in mind, and again central to bone health, is vitamin D. So this can help calcium to be absorbed in your bones where it's needed to keep those bones strong. When our skin's exposed to sunlight, it makes vitamin D, and that can be one source. However, most people need a few minutes out in the sun with exposed skin to be able to generate that much vitamin D that our body needs. So it can be really important to include some dietary sources of vitamin D, even if you're getting that sun exposure, and more so if you're not. The other thing is that can vary season by season. So summer, we may be getting a little bit more sun and can generate a bit more vitamin D. In the wintertime, we're more covered up. But equally in summer, if you're putting on sunscreen or covering up, you're not going to be getting as much vitamin D. So thinking about how can I get this through my diet is an important thing to do. Another thing is, as we age, our skin can also become less efficient at producing vitamin D from sunlight. So just another reason why thinking about dietary sources can be a good thing. On the slide there, I've got some key things that you could be looking to include in your diet to help boost your vitamin D intake. That's things like fatty fish, so salmon, mackerel, sardines, trout, and herring, fortified margarines, and that comes down to just checking that nutrition information panel to see if vitamin D has been added to the margarine. Some cow's milks have been fortified, or plant-based alternatives have also had some vitamin D added. Looking at that nutrition information panel is where you'll find that information. And an interesting source of vitamin D is actually mushrooms. So if you place mushrooms into sunlight for a couple of hours in the middle of the day, they will actually generate vitamin D. And then when you cook them up and eat them, you can access the vitamin D that they've produced. So that's always a bit of an interesting source of vitamin D, that by popping those mushrooms in the sun, you can actually get some vitamin D from them. As I mentioned before, eating well is not just important to make sure that we get the vitamins and minerals we need, but it's also really key to our mental health. The way we eat, whether we exercise and how we socialize, can have a big impact on our mood. So too can the choice of foods that we make. So a high intake of what we call discretionary foods, or more commonly known as kind of like your junk foods, can actually be linked with poor mental health, particularly depression. So by including nourishing foods, which I'll talk a little bit more about some key examples, we can make sure that we're safeguarding our physical health and our mental health. So some examples of things you can do to support good mental health through your diet is eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, choosing whole grain breads and cereals, so those where they have extra fiber, eating more legumes, nuts and seeds, aiming for a few serves of fish each week, and making sure that you're looking wherever you can to swap those discretionary foods for nutritious options. So what do I mean more specifically about discretionary foods? It's those things that are high in saturated fat, high in salt, high in sugar, and low in fiber. So it's your takeaway meals, it's your biscuits and lollies and cakes, it's fried foods, it's soft drinks, it's those things that have a lot of extra calories, a lot of extra of those things that we really want to limit: added sugars, added salt, saturated fat, and miss out on a lot of the nutrients that our body needs, particularly fiber. If you're experiencing weight loss where you've perhaps dropped some weight without trying and you're trying to regain that again, it does become important to include some foods that are a little bit higher in energy. So you're trying to take in more energy to build that body weight back up again, in which case you might tend to focus on those higher energy density foods, so those foods that provide a bit more calories. However, when doing that, it is still really important to make sure that the food choices you're making are rich in nutrients as well. So looking at foods that contain healthy fats like avocados, nuts and seeds, including a little bit of olive oil with your meals, or choosing a fatty fish can help you get extra calories in without loading up on those things like saturated fat, the salt and the sugar that we really want to keep at bay. So fiber, I've talked about this a little bit already, but I want to really emphasize the benefits of fiber. It plays a really central role in making sure that our body is working the way it needs to and keeping us feeling well. Some people may experience constipation a bit more frequently as they get older. They might not be moving their body as much. And so therefore, supporting good bowel health can come down really a lot to our dietary choices. So we want to make sure that we're supporting good bowel function by including a lot of fiber-rich foods to help prevent that constipation. Examples of foods that are really great sources of fiber are your whole grain foods, so breads and cereals. Think wholemeal or whole grain bread, choosing a brown rice over a white, some wholemeal pasta. Oats are a really great source of soluble fiber, which can not only help with that gut health part, but also with our cholesterol management or our blood pressure. So there's multiple benefits of a high fiber intake. Fruits are another great source. So think whole fruits rather than fruit juices. So fruits in their whole form. It might be, a medium-sized piece of fruit like an apple, a pear, or a banana, or 2 pieces of smaller fruit. So it might be 2 small kiwi fruits or 2 small apricots would be the equivalent of a serve. And also vegetables and legumes. I can't emphasize vegetables and legumes enough. They're packed with fiber, they're full of nutrients, so they're going to be really key parts of a healthy, balanced diet. If you're trying to maintain or gain a little bit of weight, focusing in on those starchier vegetables, your potato, your sweet potato, your pumpkin, your corn, can help you with bringing in a little bit more energy without having to have a lot of bulk. But they're all really great sources of dietary fiber. So including these regularly and really aiming to include as much of the lentils, chickpeas, beans, any of those legumes into your diet as often as you can, because they're fantastic sources of fiber. They're also really high in protein, and they're packed with all of the vitamins and minerals that our body needs to stay strong and healthy. Along with fiber, it's really important to make sure you're maintaining your hydration, so including plenty of fluid throughout your day. The slide there shows 8 glasses of water, but your fluid can come from other things. So if you're a tea or coffee drinker, that would count towards your fluid intake. Fluid's really important, and making sure you're getting enough of it, because it helps to maintain a healthy blood pressure. So it can prevent us from feeling lightheaded. It also helps to keep our kidneys healthy and our bowels a good consistency, as I talked about with fiber. So preventing constipation comes down to a good fiber intake and plenty of fluids as well. Be sure when you're thinking about hydration to include the amount of fluids you're drinking, to increase the amount of fluids you're drinking if the weather is hot or when you're exercising. So accounting for any extra losses that you might have through that warmer weather or through doing some type of physical exertion. So if you're out in the garden and it's a warm day, or even if it's not, making sure you're drinking a little bit extra to account for that. And if you're not trying to gain weight, it's really important to make sure that your fluids are centered around those things that are not going to add additional unnecessary calories. So limiting sugary drinks or added kind of sweetened milky drinks if you're not needing to be gaining weight. Focusing in on water, maybe some tea or coffee with limited added calories. In addition to nutrition, exercise can also really help with maintaining our health and strength as we get older. Being active is great for both the body and the mind, so ticks both of those boxes. It helps us to maintain healthy weight and keep our muscles and bones strong. So doing a combination of resistance type exercises, so that might be using something that you can lift to build strength or even your own body weight, as well as cardio type exercises where you can get your heart rate up, obviously in line with any guidelines that you've been provided by your your treating health physician, so your GP or any specialist you might be seeing. As a general guide, it's recommended to include about 2.5 hours of activity a week with a combination of different activities, with strength exercises being on at least 2 days of the week. These are obviously very general guidelines, and you need to take into consideration what type of activity you've done in the past. So rather than kind of jumping in to do 2.5 hours if you've not been a big exerciser before, and taking it slowly. An exercise physiologist or a physiotherapist can actually help with developing a tailored, individualized exercise program. So as I mentioned with dietary information, if you're looking for something a bit more individualized, a bit more specific to your needs, definitely look to engage a clinician in that area, a dietitian for help with food, or a physio or exercise physiologist for help with a suitable exercise program for you. And on that same train, if you're feeling like you are needing help to manage a particular long-term health condition like diabetes or heart disease or perhaps osteoporosis, or if you've lost weight without trying, if you're experiencing any digestive issues that you can't seem to resolve, or if you've got concerns about your bone health, these are great points to look for extra help. A dietitian, a physiotherapist, other clinicians may be really well suited to come to speak to you about what your individual needs are. Talking specifically about that help through the Commonwealth Home Support Program, you can access a dietitian who can come and provide you an assessment and tailored dietary advice. We can talk to you about things like healthy meals, planning suitable snacks, help you with thinking about how best to plan your grocery shopping. What's the best way to think about meal preparation? Are there additional supports with meal preparation that might be helpful, like a meal delivery service? Connect you with community meal programs, or perhaps provide a referral to an occupational therapist who can talk to you about specialized equipment, cutlery, cooking implements that are going to help make healthy eating easier for you. One thing I will note is that oral nutrition supplements, so where you might be needing a little bit of extra energy and something like a Sustagen or an Ensure powder might be helpful. Unfortunately, these aren't covered under the Commonwealth Home Support Program, that can be accessed under a home care package. So that would be something to definitely have a conversation with your dietitian about if they feel that that's necessary, and then they can provide you with some information about options in that area. Okay. So just in summary of what I've hopefully managed to emphasize in talking to you today is the importance of eating a balanced diet. So that really comes down to having a lot of variety, eating from all of the food groups, making sure that you're including your fruit and vegetables for the vitamins and minerals they provide and the dietary fiber, including nice starchy foods to help with the fiber intake again, some protein sources, aiming for 2 serves of protein per day from lean sources, staying hydrated, so whether that's from water alone or perhaps it's from other drinks that you're having. I know I'm thinking about tea and coffee because the weather is quite cold at the moment, so that can be a helpful thing to include. Making sure that you're enjoying plenty of calcium-rich foods, getting out in the sunshine, weather permitting, of course, and eating regularly throughout the day, just to make sure you have plenty of opportunities to get all of the nutrition out of the foods that you're eating. So generally, we might recommend having 6 small meals and snacks spaced throughout the day, just to make sure that you have that opportunity to absorb the nutrients from your food, and also can help if your appetite is a little bit lower, which can just naturally happen as we get older. If you'd like some more information on the resources that were included in the slides there, on that last slide, we had a picture of the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, which comes along with the Australian Dietary Guidelines. I've got a link there for the website where you can access that. Live Lighter is also another great resource for some fact sheets and information, not only about good nutrition, but also if you're thinking about being a little bit more physically active. And Nutrition Australia have some great recipes if you're a little bit stuck for what to make and how to prepare those healthy meals. If you weren't already aware, there are other webinars in the Lunch and Learn series. So the next webinar coming up is on the 6th of August, looking at compassion in care, so palliative care enhancing end-of-life quality. And on the 9th of October, stepping into health. So some insights from podiatry for improved foot care. We also have our Wellness at Home webinars on falls prevention strategies for home care too. So if you're interested in registering yourself for any of those, just scan the QR code or visit Empower's website for more information. Well, thank you, everybody. If you had any questions, please feel free to type those in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand to request to talk if you would prefer.
Can you see the Q&A there, Holly, or would you like me to read out the questions?
I've just opened it up and I can see one there about the slides being a little bit tiny and that being a little bit tricky, so apologies for that. Were there other questions there as well, Nicole?
No, I think they were talking about the writing on the panels when you were talking about the nutrition information on the side of the panels. I was saying they are small to read, but
absolutely. I find myself needing to squint, or definitely taking my optometrist's advice to get some glasses because they're so small. It makes it really hard. I've actually got the other questions up. So the first one I can see there was, are dietary vitamin supplements recommended and how do we choose the right ones? That's a really fantastic question. And I think my advice generally there would be, where you've been identified to have a vitamin or mineral deficiency, then a dietary supplement can be really helpful. However, I would strongly encourage you to think about how you might be able to access those particular nutrients from food. Food provides nutrients in a way that our body can access more effectively. So if there's something that you can add to your diet that might be a great source of that, I'd say that would be the starting point. However, sometimes you might need a bit of extra help. So a vitamin or a mineral supplement might be indicated, but I'd say that that's probably something to have a chat with your GP about. They can do some blood tests or other tests to see whether adding something like a supplement is important. The next question, I am concerned with budgeting, but will look at low-cost alternatives. Any suggestions? Absolutely. I think cost of living pressures are a really big issue for everyone at the moment. Everything in the supermarket seems to be continuously increasing in price. So what I'd say there is absolutely looking for those low-cost options, comparing the cost per 100 grams, so using those shelf labels to help as a guide of which is going to be the most economical option. And certainly keeping with those staples. So where I was really emphasizing eating plenty of legumes as a great protein source, not only are they really nutrient dense, so they have a lot of vitamins and minerals in them, they're a great source of protein, and they're also really economical. You know, a can of beans might set you back, you know, $1.20. So that's providing a great source of nutrition at a really low cost. So a lot of nutritional bang for your buck. Similarly, with things like fruits and vegetables, fresh options might be a little bit more costly depending on the season, or you might not be, you know, if you're cooking for one, you might not need a whole cauliflower or, you know, something like that. So buying frozen fruits and vegetables can be a really cost-effective way and in no way compromising the nutrition. In fact, possibly getting a little bit more in there because they're frozen so quickly from harvest. They can be a really great budgeting strategy to make sure that you're not having to sort of, be spending too much on having a healthy diet. The more you can certainly do yourself too. So if you're able to be doing a little bit of cooking at home, depending on your level of ability and activity, that can be another good cost-saving approach, is to kind of do things as much as you can from scratch. And then, can this be done by telehealth? Dietetic appointments, absolutely. Yes, we do offer telehealth appointments. There may be circumstances where it's not suitable, but we can certainly talk to you about that. But in most cases, sessions can be delivered online in much the same sort of setting as today. Alternatively, we do offer home visit appointments where we can come out and see you in your home. Hopefully I've answered the questions that were there. Did anybody else have any other questions that they'd like to post?